flavor. Okay, yeah, great. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves and giving me a flavor of your work. I was just, wow, just taken aback by the variety of topics that everybody has been engaging with. Wow, you know, definitely sort of mind-blowing, and have, you know, the topics have got real potential to make a difference. So well done to everybody. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to share my PowerPoint slides with you. I'm just bringing them up. And please let me know if you can see. Can you see the PowerPoint slides, everybody? Yeah, okay. So I just really wanted to thank Abir, first of all, for inviting me here today. It's a real honor and a privilege to be speaking to you today. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to our conversations today. So really, it's going to be a little bit of a presentation, but, you know, of course, I'll be asking you some questions. And now you've given me, you know, this information about yourself. So hopefully we could also have a discussion as well as time progresses this morning. So just going to try and... Okay, so really my background, just really want to give you a little bit of flavor about who I am, what I'm doing. So I'm an associate professor at Middlesex University in what's called DProf. So DProfs are professional doctorates. They are undertaken by practitioners who usually work in industry or in commerce, in different areas. And basically they've come to Middlesex to do a doctorate with regards to their practice. So the methodology is different to a PhD, and the ontology as well. And what we mean by transdisciplinary, there's you know, a body of literature by Niculescu, which really prioritizes this idea of transdisciplinary approaches to doing research. So in a nutshell, if you take a transdisciplinary approach to your research, it's basically, you're not looking just at one discipline, let's say like finance or accounting or business. You're looking across disciplines, and you're looking at the spaces in between disciplines, and you're making connections between them and yourself. You're acknowledging other aspects like complexity and this idea of collaborative approach to generating knowledge. Whereas with a PhD, it's slightly different. You are the author of your work, you go out there, you collect data, you have like a kind of structured approach, A, B, C, and D, you design your research, you've got your literature review, you go out there, you collect your data, then you subject the work to some analysis. So doing a DProf in a transdisciplinary approach is slightly different. I've been in academia since 1998. I was awarded my PhD in 2000. So my background is basically, my first degree was in accounting and finance. My master's was in communications policy studies. And basically that's about, you know, using the media, understanding how images and notions of communication are transmitted to society, and what can we understand by images. And then I was fortunate enough to obtain a scholarship to have a fully funded PhD undertaken. I did that from approximately the end of 1994 to 2000, and my PhD looked at issues of gender and ethnicity in the UK accounting profession. So that was really my research area for my PhD. So over the years since obtaining my PhD, I've been publishing research in the area of gender, ethnicity in UK accounting, and looking at the structures of the UK accounting profession. Another strand of my research looks at accounting education, and in particular, can we teach ethics to our undergraduate students? I have a couple of other projects at the moment where I'm looking at representations of accountants in films, and also looking at representations of accountants within the Greek context. I'm Greek, by the way, you probably realize from my name, and sort of trying to understand how this idea of the stereotype works. I'm building upon literature which is out there already, but sort of trying to see if this notion of stereotyping works within the Greek context as well, because we need to be aware different cultures, different interpretations. So I'm really interested to sort of understand whether this is happening in Greek culture as well. And basically, I've spent the last 24 years teaching accounting. I taught accounting at undergraduate level, postgraduate level, and doctoral level. So that's really kind of part of my background. I've also supervised over 120 master's dissertations in a variety of accounting and business related areas over the last 24 years. I have 7 doctoral completions in DProfs and in PhDs, and I've examined over 30 doctorates, again, different types of doctorates, PhDs, DProfs, DBAs, and at the moment I'm currently supervising another 9 international candidates. And as you can understand, at the moment, my supervision is all online, unfortunately. So moving towards preparing for the VIVA. So please feel free to, come in with me and have a discussion, because I'll be asking you a question or two in a moment. So moving towards our presentation today about, putting together some thoughts on paper in terms of how we're going to go about preparing for our VIVA. Well, we're all familiar with this idea. We need to, first of all, submit our thesis, and this represents what's called the partial fulfillment of the degree award. So really, in terms of preparing for the VIVA, it's a 2-stage approach. So the first thing is we have to submit the thesis, and the second part is we have to go for our oral defense of the thesis in terms of a VIVA. So the question I'd like to ask you is, how would we go about preparing for this? Have we got any thoughts on this? I'm opening this up. Please feel free to come in. Any ideas about how we would go about preparing for this before I share some thoughts with you? Any ideas? So we've just handed in our thesis. I know there's a couple of us here in the audience who've just done that ourselves. So how are you preparing at the moment with regards to going for your VIVA? Anybody? Anybody there? No? Abir?
We are here.
Yeah, hi, you're here. And any thoughts about how we could, prepare for our VIVA? Any thoughts from the audience? Please feel free to come in. Any thoughts? Especially the people, I think Fatma said, is she in her 3rd year? And I think Liz has just submitted as well. Any thoughts about how you're going about preparing for your VIVA?
My name is Ayodele. So
Hi.
what I do was to attend and transfer and the mock VIVA for other colleagues, and from there trying to boost my confidence and meditate on it, on how to improve on their own area of weaknesses and capitalize on their own area of strength. That's what I've been doing. That is in recent time.
That is absolutely brilliant. That is really, really fantastic preparation. Anybody else there? Anybody else? Liz, have you been preparing at the moment?
Not yet, but yes, a mock VIVA. I think that's on the cards. I'm just, at the moment, I'm just focusing on getting this in.
Okay, well done. No, that's really great. Absolutely. I totally, go for this idea of mock VIVA. Really, really fantastic. If the university and your supervisory teams can actually put that into place for you, because what are the benefits? Well, as our colleague just said to us, to get some confidence, definitely, it's really a confident boosting activity. And also what it really gives you is this idea of practicing answering the questions in terms of the various areas surrounding your thesis. So for example, your supervisory team might have picked up that maybe you're not really sure about your literature review, what you've written, and they can sort of hone in regards to this mock VIVA about asking you some more detailed questions about your explanation of your theories, your theoretical framework, your literature review. So that's really, really good practice. That's what it gives you practice. And it also helps you to plan ahead and to become more familiar with some of the arguments that you might have written some time ago, because writing a PhD is written over quite a long period of time, and sometimes we might not have really remembered what we wrote in maybe our introduction chapter or in our methodology chapter. So definitely it helps you become, again, familiar with the workings and the nuts and bolts of your thesis. And what I would say, the point here on this slide is you must absolutely know your thesis inside out. That is such an important point, because from my experience, I've been to a number of VIVAs now, and what I've found, I've been absolutely shocked where students have not been in that position. They do not know, or do not seem to know their thesis inside out. I'm the one saying to them, but you said this on page 24 and you're contradicting yourself on page 55. What's going on here? So I must honestly really stress that notion of you must know your thesis inside out. So moving forwards as well, with regards to yes,
Docs, there is two comments in the on the chat.
Please, I can't see them.
Yes, Tommy mentioned revising the finding from your field work, and Noreen mentioned try to understand how to provide justification for each stage of my research, which I think both of them are really very good ideas. Absolutely,
indeed. Absolutely, really, it really gives you that insight into perhaps areas that you might have felt confident about, but your supervisors on sort of second reading of your thesis, because obviously they have to read it to give you a mock VIVA, that's really the whole point. So they can sort of be in a position to see some potential weaknesses or strengths that you were maybe directing your attention in other areas. So that's a really good thing to do. And with regards to this idea about knowing your thesis inside out, I would definitely sort of prioritize this notion of I do not know of any university which would not allow you, when you go for your final VIVA, to actually have a copy of your thesis in front of you with post-it notes. I do not know any university which would not allow you to do that. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely say to you, go through your thesis with a fine-tooth comb, put some post-it notes, because then you can easily move between chapters, between arguments, to connect some ideas together, if indeed the externals later on do ask you some fundamental points. So you really need to know that thesis inside out. Again, now moving towards preparing for the VIVA again. So with regards to a VIVA, I don't know with regards to your particular university regulations, but I think you do allow them. Some institutions allow the candidate to present a PowerPoint slide. That's correct, isn't it, Abir, for your institution? Is that correct?
To be very honest, as a PhD supervisor, I always advise my PhD students to prepare PowerPoint slides just to give the examiners a flavor of what they have achieving, and also just to take another box. This will ease the pressure for the PhD candidate, just to go straight into questions or just to talk about, provide the summary. So I always advise my PhD student to prepare PowerPoint presentation and present in front of the examiners.
Absolutely, so, absolutely, really good practice. I've been to, again, lots of VIVAs where the student had the opportunity to give a PowerPoint presentation or even just an oral conversational presentation, and they declined that. Again, this has got so many benefits in terms of it allows you time to kind of calm yourself down for your talking. You become more sort of, calm, less nervous about talking through your slides, or even just talking without any slides about your work. And it also helps you to refresh your memory and to focus in. And also, most importantly, I would say, because the examiners, remember, they've already read your thesis and they've got a whole list of things that they would want to discuss with you. So if you're able to give that presentation, what you're giving the examiners is clarity. You've basically got an advantage over them because you've given them a presentation. You've explained in really simple terms what your thesis was about, what you tried to do, and then that's it. Then they can ask you some questions. And 9 times out of 10, for me personally, when a student has done that, I've crossed off a few areas already because it's become really clear to me in terms of what they've been saying in the presentation. So definitely, please think about doing a PowerPoint slide.
Also, before you move, docs, what I really found as an examiner, whether internal or external, when I listen to PhD candidate kind of do a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes I cancel some of my questions because they already kind of answered it or dealt with it during the presentation, which is absolutely great because instead of having a list of questions that you already answered the question while you are doing your presentation, and make it very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. No, absolutely. 100% agree with you. And the other point to remember, so like I said, you've done your presentation, and remember at that point, you've got an advantage. You've got the advantage over the examining team, because usually it will be an examining team. It's not just going to be one examiner. Usually there's a chair and then internal examiner from the university, and their role is to be familiar with the rules and regulations of your university's doctoral level 8. And also there could be 1 or 2 externals selected who are obviously external to your university, who would have no connection with the candidate or indeed their work. So at that point, remember, you are the expert in that room. You have written the thesis. They haven't written the thesis. You're very familiar with it. You have the experience, and all you need to do is to listen carefully to their questions. If you don't understand what they're saying, it's not embarrassing to ask them to repeat again. That's all absolutely fine. And then I would say to explain and to justify your position. So they might ask you, so why did you choose to use legitimacy theory, for example? So your response to that should be couched in terms of giving a justification as to why you selected it, and possibly why you did not select some other alternatives, and why you felt that was the most appropriate for your particular thesis. And furthermore, is the examining team's role to satisfy themselves that it is indeed your work. And in order for them to do this, they will be asking you some searching questions. So they will usually start off with asking you some nice, simple questions, possibly around your motivation. Why did you choose this area of study? Could you please tell us more about this? And then they'll ask for some really nitty-gritty questions, maybe talking about the literature review, methodology, etc. So don't be upset if they do ask you difficult questions. Their role is to make sure that you've written this thesis yourself and you are able to articulate the arguments and show that it is indeed your work. And it's also the examining team's responsibility to make sure that the thesis has reached the standard to be awarded the degree. So what I mean by this is, when I've worked as an external for any university, I've been given a whole list of the rules and regulations with regards to the university that I'm attending. And basically, I have to make sure that the thesis I'm reading has reached that standard to be awarded the degree. If it hasn't, then of course, I might then go back and ask for more work to be done by the candidate to make sure that they have reached that standard. So that is always at the back of my mind. Has the student reached the standard? So another thing in terms of understanding yourself as a student, have I reached that standard? I need to listen to the advice of my supervisors. So my supervisor and the examining team, they know me best. They know best as well in terms of their experience. They have so much experience. I need, as a candidate, to listen to them. And lots of times, well, actually lots, what I mean by, there's been a couple of times where I've been to a VIVA and it's really, really obvious that the candidate submitted against the supervisor's best judgment. So I can usually tell because you can see a little bit of tension there in the room. So please, if you're about to submit and your supervisory team is saying, no, I'm really sorry, you're not quite there yet. I am really suggesting you go back and do some final adjustments on your literature review, on your data. Please listen to them. They know best. I know we all want to sort of get through the process as quickly as possible, but trust me, it really does stand you in good stead if you do listen to your supervisors and you go back and you make a few extra adjustments. I can see there's something in the chat. Let me just see, is there something there? There's somebody saying, I'm still at an early stage of my research. May I please ask in terms of questions, usually how much details the questions would go into? Do we need to always remember some critical figures, etc., or questions are more in general or wider directions on the research? That's a really, really good set of questions there. Well, usually what happens, it just on the one hand depends on the topic. Yes, the examiners will sort of start with some general questions about motivation, contribution. I've got a slide on this to come. But what will happen, they'll use some sort of general questions, sweeping questions, first of all, to make you feel at ease, to relax you into the conversation. And then they will definitely go into detail, for example, about your literature review. Why did you choose a particular theoretical framework? How did you go about designing your research with regards to your methodology as well? What was your stance with regards to your methodology? And of course, I would definitely say you need to be aware of some critical figures, maybe within your stat, if you've done ANOVAs, if you've done chi-squared and stuff like that, you really need to be aware and to be in a position to justify that. And of course, towards the end of your thesis, they might be asking more sort of general questions about, what could you do more to sort of further your research? How could you supplement the research that you've done? That could be a number of questions that they might be asking you. So I hope I've answered that question. That was a really good set of questions there. I can see there's something else there. Okay, no worries. Thank you. So moving on here, areas for questioning. As I was saying, got a few slides on this. What could they be asking you? So remember, your thesis should tell a story. So it should go from A to B to C to D to Z. So remember, your A is your introduction, your Z is your conclusion chapter. And of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff in between. So I like to look at the thesis like a sandwich. So I've got a piece of bread on the top, that's my introduction. The conclusion being another piece of bread, and in the middle is all the filling. So remember, bread, and filling in the middle. So your introduction has to then tie up with your conclusion. Again, I've seen a number of theses where the candidate has almost forgotten in the conclusion what the aims and objectives were to begin with. So please just go back and make sure that that introduction really tallies up and connects with that conclusion chapter. So what would the examining team usually look at? Like I mentioned earlier, motivation. Why you? Why have you chosen this area of study? And what is the connection between you and this area? So I jotted down as I was asking everybody earlier, what your areas were in. So I'm just gonna pick some here. So there was somebody who was looking at, I believe, video games and identity. So if I was examining this particular candidate, I would be asking, this is really interesting. So could you please tell me why you decided to choose video games as your area of study? So obviously I'd expect, an answer from the candidate saying, well, maybe as a child, I was really fascinated by video games, and I could sort of see there was a lot of influence on people, etc. And I was really interested in notions of shaping identity. So can you see that there's a kind of story emerging there about the candidate possibly, being introduced to video games as a young child, being fascinated by that and moving that forward. So what we're looking for is motivation. Why and how does that connect with you? So that you haven't just chosen some random topic out there. For example, I want to do a thesis on UFOs and spaceships. Well, what's the connection between me and that topic? Very little at the moment. Contribution. So the value of your work. What contribution is this work going to make? So what we call it is the so what story. Does it really matter if we have another thesis maybe on entrepreneurship? What is it that we are exactly trying to discover? So contribution, how does it add to existing knowledge, or how does it actually push the boundaries forward in that particular discipline or area? Again, the examining team are going to look very closely at your research purpose. So the research purpose is the big idea. And then they want to look at your aims. What is it specifically that you want to achieve in this thesis, and your objectives? What are the steps, the individual steps that you're going to indeed take to, undertake this piece of research? And also, they're going to be asking you questions on your literature review. show, in other words, how you are standing on the shoulder of giants. So how are you using, for example, some classic works in the literature review area, and how do those make sense to your story, or how are you adding to that literature? Because basically you might find that you want to expand the literature in a particular area. Maybe that's part of the work of your thesis. And how are you using the insights from your literature review to basically develop your conceptual framework or your theoretical lens? So you will find that the examining team are looking for theory, because it's the theory which is going to help you, and with regards to connecting with the methodology, to look at the data, because literature review and methodology go hand in hand to function as that lens to sort of understand what that data is saying to you. Now, I'm going to throw this out to people: methodology and methods. So I have found from my experience that methodology and methods are not the same. Would people agree with me here? Would you agree? Or am I totally wrong? Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So methodology and methods. Can I please ask the audience, what do you understand by methodology and methods? Can you tell me, anybody? Any volunteers? What do we understand by methodology?
I think methods are tools that we use to select a technique, whereas methodology is the analysis of all the methods and procedures that we are going to investigate.
Okay, I like your explanation about the methods. I think that's really spot on in terms of the tools. Definitely, I agree with you. But your explanation about methodology, could you explain a little bit further for me? Are you able to explain, or anybody else, just give me a little bit more about methodology, please?
Methodologies we apply during the initial stage of the research, isn't it? So
depends.
I think methodology entails the philosophy, the approach, the method itself in setting up the research you intend to investigate. So it's like other people's work end in literature review, while your own work starts from methodology, trying to construct the architecture of what you intend to look for and how you intend to look for it.
I think that's a really good explanation. So in a nutshell, definitely totally agree with the former definition. Methods are the tools. Yep. So like, going out, your questionnaire, your survey, those are the tools. The methodology, absolutely, as our colleague just said, he used the word architecture. So it's the bigger being, the bigger engine. So think about it like a car. We've got a car. If the car doesn't have an engine, so in other words, if the thesis doesn't have a methodology section or chapter, the car's going to go nowhere. So it's part of the foundations. And what we mean by methodology, you're absolutely right. It's a kind of discussion about the philosophical approaches and how you as a researcher are placed within that kind of schema of philosophy. And then that will guide your approach in terms of guiding your methods that you'll be using. So in a kind of really crude, simplistic nutshell, I'm just going to draw a little diagram here. I should have possibly earlier done it as a slide, but I'm going to just draw this for you. And this is what I used to use with my students, okay? I don't know if can people see this? Can people see the stick person in a box? Can you see this?
I can't see the head.
Yeah, can you see? Can you see?
Yes.
Just a stick person in a box. So we know that with regards to methodology, we have two kind of schools of thought, don't we? We have phenomenology and we have positivism. Yeah, you've heard of these two schools of thought, yes? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this one, the easy way to remember it, and in terms of remembering the assumptions, this stick person is in a box. So the box represents, if you like, the world or their reality. So if the person is in the box, this could represent phenomenology. Yeah. And in terms of the assumptions guiding this, the researcher is part of the reality that they are studying. Yeah. The world is subjective. Yeah. And science or knowledge is not value free. Does that make sense? They are part of the world that they are looking at. Is that clear? Does that make sense to people?
Yes,
Yeah?
it does.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and let me just do the opposite now. So that's a stick person in the box. And I'm going to draw now another stick person. And they are, can everybody see that? Sorry for my very crude diagram. Can people see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you see that? The researcher, the person is outside the box. So this could be a kind of visual representation of positivism. So the assumptions are that the researcher is studying, phenomena where they are totally independent, so not connected in any way, and they are unbiased because they're unconnected. And you see, makes sense in terms of the assumption. So this could be one methodological school. So here we're explaining the assumptions of positivism. And on the other diagram, we were trying to explain the tenets or the assumptions of phenomenology. So if you kind of think about it in terms of what our colleague said earlier about the architecture and about the philosophical position, and that's what I was trying to illustrate with those crude diagrams, that would then give you an understanding that it's a bigger being than just the methods, which is a questionnaire or survey, etc. Is that clear for everybody? Did that make sense? Yeah? I'm just double checking the chat. There's something here. Sorry, I'm just double checking the chat. Method is for ways to tackle a task. Methodology, systematical ways or strategies to handle larger research or project. Yes, indeed. But again, this idea of the philosophical angle I would add there. As I said, the two are not the same, they are different. And please try to sort of understand the difference and be in a position to articulate it for your particular project. Because again, I'm speaking here from experience. When I've been to a few VIVAs, I've kind of really drilled in on this, and I have found that some students think that methodology is actually methods, and that's all they've got, in their thesis, just methods and no articulation of the philosophy or their standing point, and that will then have an effect on how that data is treated and how that data is then explored and analyzed. And as I said, the data and the analysis, that could be another area for the examiners to kind of be picking on. How was the data gathered? Is there a logical sequence? So did you do a survey first? Did you do interviews? Secondly, how did you select the order? What techniques did you use to interrogate the data? So you need to justify how you subjected the data to various techniques. And how did the literature review or the conceptual framework aid your understanding with regards to the data, and what does it reveal? Because just to kind of describe the data, so I conducted a survey of 100 people and I found that 20% said this and 2% said that and 50% said that. The question then becomes, so what is it revealing? And you need to try and use your conceptual framework or your literature review that you've got there to kind of push this analysis further, because that is just merely description, what I've given you. There's no analysis there. So you need to try and think about your literature review functioning with your methodology, and how does that then actually help you to form a theoretical lens to understand your data. So please try and move away from just mere description. It's fine to have some descriptive stats, don't get me wrong, that's absolutely fine, but then you're going to have to take your analysis to a higher level after that. And then they're obviously going to be asking you about your findings of your thesis and your conclusions. What did you find? And how have your aims and objectives been met? So remember what I said earlier, the sandwich, the bread and the filling in the middle. So they're going to go back to your chapter 1. They're going to look at your aims and objectives. Then they're going to see what you found at the end. And did you managed to fulfill your aims and objectives, or didn't you? And if you didn't, that's absolutely fine, but you just need to say why that wasn't the case. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Limitations, again, they're going to be asking you about limitations of the study. What limited the study? And I must admit, I do know this is the truth. A lot of us have been limited by time, but I get a little bit annoyed when I see that written in a thesis. Yes, we're all limited by time. The examiners know that, but try and be a bit more creative, a bit more imaginative about the limitations. So don't just say time and cost. We know that really is a factor. Try and move on from that. And of course, if COVID has been a real factor, of course, in the last couple of years, please articulate that further. Don't just say, yeah, COVID, but try and explain what was it about COVID that restricted you, and what was your contingency plan that you put in action to try and get data if that was the issue. So the examining team would also like to see that the work will lead to other future studies. They're really interested in how your research will have a life after this thesis is finished. So are there a few papers to be published by yourselves after you've been awarded your thesis? What is the future for this work? And again, a really, really important point that I've kind of left towards the end is about ethics. So they're going to be asking you questions about the ethics surrounding your project. Was the work conducted in an ethical manner? Did the work go through an ethics committee at your home institution? And for example, have companies and individuals been anonymized in the work? Were all permissions obtained? So you're going to have to display and show somewhere within your appendix that you do have ethical approval from your institution and everything was signed off, that it was okay, because, you know, nowadays we're really, really, you know, have to be really on the ball with ethics. It's not just a question of, yeah, I'm going to go out and interview these 20 people and it doesn't matter if I refer to their names in my thesis. Yes, it does matter. We need to take steps to anonymize them because, you know, their reputations could be at stake. We just can't do things like this. We need to be really, really careful about how we go about anonymizing their work and obviously what they've said to us. And issues that I've noticed from my experience of being an external examiner and also being a supervisor as well, that I've seen, as I've mentioned earlier, there's no clear understanding of the candidate between methodology and methods. And they're also been in a position to, they've been unable to explain the rationale for their work. So they haven't been in a position to explain to me, why did they choose this particular area and in terms of their motivation. I remember being in one VIVA and I asked this candidate this, and what they did was this, they just shrugged their shoulders. They just could not answer. And I was thinking, that's really, really strange. That's not giving off a good impression to the examining team. So it's like doing this, shrugging your shoulders. Well, I don't know. The examining team won't be in a position to know if you don't know yourself. So please be really, you know, sort of ready to explain the rationale for your work. And again, another bugbear that I've seen where references are not used correctly, they're either missing or they're copied from other sources. The reference list is inaccurate. They've been using really old references and the reference list at the end has not been updated for 5 years. I've actually seen this. So I'm talking from experience here. So please go back, check every single reference, double check everything. That's really important. And again, I've seen spelling mistakes and grammar, poor grammar and syntax throughout, and the work becomes meaningless. And I want to just give you an example here. And I wrote this in a PhD VIVA report that I wrote about a couple of years ago. And I'm just going to read this out to you. And please honestly tell me if you understand what this means, because I certainly did it. And I saw this in a PhD thesis. The intention of exploratory studies is not conducted for a problem, which was high levels of uncertainty or ignorance and not well researched before, for researchers to seek new understanding and generate a better perception of research topic. Did anybody understand what the meaning of that paragraph was? Did anybody understand that?
Yes, we do.
You do?
Oh, yes, I do.
I do not. I really did not. I did not understand that. So I wrote in my report, this is meaningless. This is meaningless. It does not make sense. So please make sure you go through your work, you check your grammar, and you make it really crystal clear what you are communicating to the examining team. Because remember, they're not mind readers. They need to be in a position, they don't know you, they've never met you before, they're just reading your work and they're judging the text. So the text needs to be crystal clear, okay? Again, this is what I've also noticed from my experience. Being rude to the examiners will not help in any way. Trust me, people have been rude, candidates have been rude. Act with humility and show respect. I've really seen this and I haven't been too impressed. Remember, also the thesis will become a public document for all to see. Therefore, the work must be of its best standard and is a reflection of you. So what I mean by when I read out that little paragraph to you, that will not reflect the best standard of that particular candidate. So the work needs to be crystal clear. It needs to be, the best standard that can be displayed on the internet, because your thesis will become a public document. It's usually put in a research repository. So we need to make sure it's a good reflection of you. And also it's the job of the examiners to make sure that the work, as I said earlier, has reached the required standard. That's what really they're checking. That's what they're there for. They've been hired by your university to make sure that your university standards have been reached. And really that's their job. So I don't really have anything further to say. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions, any observations you may have. If you'd like to share them with us, be more than happy to take questions, observations.
Just I wanted to mention something, docs, for you guys, as examiners, whether internal or external, because of course we don't know you, assume that we don't know you, we have read a work for some person that we didn't know, we did not involve in the producing of the thesis. So put in your mind that examiners, the first objective they wanted to achieve is that you are the person who has done this work. So make sure that, because of course, if you are involved, for example, in the methodology and you tried this model and you tried this theory and didn't work because of so and so and so, you will be able to explain. So for example, why quantitative, why qualitative? I know some of my PhD students who are attending today that they went through many routes until they are achieving, they are kind of, finalize what they are doing in terms of data collection, in terms of data analysis, in terms of everything. But because they have done that themselves, they experience this thing. So I'm sure when it comes to the VIVA time, they will be able to explain why, what are the processes. We started to do this and to do that, but we realized that this is a problem and this is a problem, so we went to do this way instead of that. I think, they wanted to know that there was a structure there, and you have already, during the PhD journey, of course, you have taken some decisions. Some of these decisions you have to illustrate, demonstrate why you have taken them. What what if you didn't take them? And in terms also, I wanted to also mention something about limitations. When you read, just imagine when you finish your PhD and you are in the final writing up, look at the papers that are published in good journals and make your dissertation is a kind of a extended copy of this paper. So when it comes to the limitation, I'm always do this, and while I'm writing my papers, I list all the limitation and link them straight away to the opportunities for future research. So this will kind of, because nobody can do everything in any topic. So for example, say someone has done quantitative and collected data for 10 years for a specific sector. And one of the limitation is the focusing on one sector. And that might be you link it straight away that future research should look at more sectors or more comparison or more years, etc., etc. So try to, while you are producing from day one, even from writing chapter one, from the first kind of months in your PhD journey, think about the VIVA. I'm not scaring you here, but just to kind of take notes, put notes, write notes, and even open a file and name it VIVA comments or VIVA observation or VIVA notes, because of course after 3 years with what's going on, you might forget. We are, by the end of the day, we are human being. So this is the only two comments I wanted to mention. Ayodele, you want to?
Yeah. So the question I want to ask is, I have two questions.
Yes.
The first one is during the VIVA, because some of us are very close to VIVA, and this is very, very, very germane to us. During the VIVA, is it advisable to have a slide and also a copy of the thesis? Because some people have said they always prefer not to go with a slide. No, the reason being that at times when you do the presentation through the slide, it gives the examiner opportunity to ask further questions, which they may not ask if you don't present a slide.
Yeah, this is what I mentioned at the beginning. Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I really like to listen to a presentation, like a slide PowerPoint presentation, because for me, before listening to the slides and hearing the candidate speak, I've just gone on the black and white document, the document in front of me, that's the only thing speaking to me. So I've made a list of my questions. Then if I listen to the PowerPoint, 9 times out of 10, I've sat there and I've deleted 3, 4 questions.
I'm the same. Exactly.
Or I've thought, okay, that's really interesting. This candidate has mentioned this about his methods, but that was not said in the thesis. So then I would say, when I get onto the methods or something, I would say, okay, that was really interesting. In your slide, you talked about this, but why didn't you say it in your thesis? And they might say, oh, I didn't think it was relevant. Then I would say, please consider it to be relevant. So remember, for you, it's about you producing your best work. So it's not about the examiners trying to find you out or trying to, stop you passing. No, they're not interested in that. What they're interested in is the standard of the work. That is already there in front of them. So what they're trying to assess is, do you know your stuff? And if you do not know your stuff, that's when they will make sure that they want you to go back and know your stuff better, or they know you know your stuff, and you just then need to put a little bit more because you've already said it in the VIVA presentation. Just put those extra details in methodology or wherever it's going to go to convince the public you really know your stuff.
Okay, the second question is the limitation and area of further study.
Yeah.
Is there any clear difference between limitations and area of further study? So
limitations, I would say, are about, so when I said earlier, I've seen a lot of candidates put in there, my time was a limitation. I only had 3 years to do this thesis, or I could not, afford, travel to go and, interview people face to face. So I did it online. Those kind of ideas, they kind of put me off. I'll be honest, they kind of put me off. So what I'm talking about limitations are, maybe you are limited by your use of some existing theories out there. So maybe you were using legitimacy theory and some other variants of legitimacy theory, but you felt that your theoretical framework was maybe not quite right, and maybe you could have extended it, and therefore your further research then would enable you to go out and extend the existing literature, if that makes sense. So partly what you've discovered for your thesis and your work, and you undertaking this piece of work for 3 or 4 years, you've noticed that there have been deficiencies in maybe existing theories in a particular area. Therefore, your further work that you might intend to do is develop new understandings for furthering these theories, or possibly undertaking further research in different contexts, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Really good question. Anybody else? I can see something here. I am planning to use action research. The data is coming from the digital transformation in my company, and however, I am part of this journey. Would that be one of the limits that I am involved too much? Well, that's again a fantastic question. It really depends on the nature of your PhD or DBA program at your home institution. So first of all, I would say to you, go back to your program guide, what the program guide allows you to do. If, for example, it does allow you to do that, then if it's coming from your own company, there will be ethical issues there. So you have to make sure, first of all, that this is allowed within the rules and regulations of your institution. Look at the rules, look at the program guide, have in-depth discussions with your supervisory team, first of all, if they're going to allow you to do this. Submit an ethical form via your ethical committee at the university. And definitely action research is a fantastic, approach to undertake and get really good, research in terms of reflection and, going through cycles. That's really fantastic. But I would just for now err on the side of caution, because I can see some ethical considerations there which need to be ironed out. And you need to be clear about what you are doing and how you're going to be using that data, and more importantly, how you're going to be presenting it in your thesis. Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
So please have that conversation with your supervisors and go through the program handbook. Okay, I'm just looking at the chat here. Sorry, I need to leave now. No worries. You're very welcome. Is it a master thesis is based on theory? That's again a really good question. Again, it depends on the topic, and again what your supervisors are kind of saying is allowable within the rules and regulations within the handbook. So for our transdisciplinary DProf doctorates, we are not really allowing students to take a positivist approach. They can use some positivist techniques, like, I can go out and do a survey, but it depends how you're going to use that survey. So you need to be really careful. That is a question which depends. So the answer to that question is depends. You're very welcome.
You're very welcome.
Okay, I have a question.
Please.
Yeah.
That's okay. I mean, in the process of my research and what's been unfolding, it's made me a lot more passionate, looking at issues around poverty. To what extent are you allowed to defend your thesis without sounding too emotional, because initially you said, someone was being rude, or, I think sometimes after reading something so much for 3 years and getting so much data, you start getting too involved as well, and you find it difficult to separate yourself from what you're doing. So how to what extent can you defend it, without sounding too, rude or coming across as rude?
Absolutely, no. I think that's an excellent question that you've put forward there. I would say there's no harm in being passionate, Femi, about your research. No harm in that at all, because that shows to the examining team, you are really dedicated to this piece of research. And so what I'm also trying to sort of say as well is try and have a balance where you're saying, okay, this really means a lot to me because of A, B, C, and D, and you're showing that through your passion, through your articulation of the ideas and the theory, but then you sort of stand back a bit and then you say, the conclusions that I have reached through using my theoretical framework and my methodology on this data are A, B, C, and D. So you've shown your passion, yeah, but you've also shown to the examining team that you have reached these conclusions based on the theories that you've used and through the techniques that you have subjected your data to. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
So you are speaking from your passion, but you are also then just taking a back seat for a moment to say the findings of my thesis are A, B, C, and D through my use of this theory or this conceptual framework, etc. So you're basing it on something very tangible there. It's not just your own opinions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anybody else?
No, because
Hi.
to what Femi said,
Yes.
we must talk about the reflexivity, isn't it? Because as a qualitative researcher, we are part of our research process, and our prior experiences, assumption, beliefs definitely influence the research process.
Absolutely.
So we must talk about these things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because as I was explaining earlier with my crude diagram, you know, the person in the box, you cannot divorce yourself from your reality. You are part of that reality that you are studying. And you may, I'm not sure, you may have come across, but I will try and put a really quick reference in here. This is from a journal, Accounting Organizations and Society. If you just go to Google Scholar, hopefully you can bring it up. That's the journal title. And there was, I think it's 1988 was the year. And there's an author called Ruth Hines. And she wrote an article, something like, in communicating reality, we construct reality. I definitely would encourage everybody to have a look at that article. You'll read it and you think, what on earth is this article about? But I reread that article once a year without fail, and I get different insights every single time. So it's written in a kind of narrative and a story fashion as a conversation as well. Really fantastically written article, and it will give you a lot of creative ideas and imagination. And I'm just going to give you a little kind of clue. One thing that I've seen lately within that article is this idea of corporate social responsibility. So this would give you one way of thinking about how do we do reflexivity. Remember, you will be the expert in the room, but there is a fine line between being confident and arrogant. Absolutely, yes. I've been in one VIVA where the candidate was absolutely arrogant, really, really. I was like, wow, you know, what's going on here? I was really quite shocked. But, you know, that's all fine. That's good, you know. But at the end of the day, I would definitely not suggest, you know, people are going to go into it being arrogant, that you know everything. No, we're all here to learn. Yeah. And definitely I have learned through, you know, so much through doing these examinations and supervising students. Really, really, it's a two-way conversation. Is there any other question?
Yeah, just one more question.
Yes, please.
If your research finding leads to the development of a new framework, and it's, I mean, obviously it's still evolving because that's part of your findings. Are you able to look at it as an area for future research?
Absolutely, indeed, Femi, indeed.
Okay, right,
yes. So like you've obviously observed something through your work, through your studies. So therefore, I would say that in terms of further research, you know, I'd like to, moving forwards, I'd like to conduct further research or extend my conceptual framework, because I have noticed, you can say the word noticed, that previous literature does not reveal A, B, C, and D, or the key players are not, you know, visible within the framework. So I want to try and further this research by devising or extending a framework which acknowledges the importance of A, B, C, and D.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Also, do not be scared from the VIVA. Look at it as a celebration where you will go and show all your hard work. So train your mind to look forward to it. Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, the examiners are not there to kind of find fault with your work. They're there to see, have you reached a standard? Is what you're saying, does it make sense? And have you got a story to tell? And have you met that standard according to the university standard of what that PhD, DBA, DProf, whatever is supposed to have reached? And of course, things like not doing references correctly or not having good grammar in the thesis, it really does not help with the reading of the thesis. So remember, try to make the thesis as reader friendly for your audience as possible. Reader friendly, that's really key.
One point I really wanted to mention, of course, as I put in the chat, examiners will be there or not to criticize you. They are there just to provide, constructive feedback. But I'm talking here to those who are in the very early stage of their PhD, just to try to do some publication during the PhD. Because, for example, if I'm acting as an internal or external for some of the work of the PhD, it's already published in a very high quality journals. So what I'm going to say, I'm not going to say, oh, no, this work is not good, because it's already published and recognized and being reviewed by experts in the area. So work hard, speak with your supervisor, involve in publication, ask your supervisors to involve in reviewing the process as well. I did allow some of my PhD students to be involved in reviewing some articles, and this helping you in developing a lot. So involve in the whole kind of research cycle area. Don't leave everything until you finish the PhD, because you will realize that you finish the PhD and you really need to start to learn all this all over again. So do them while you are in the PhD.
Absolutely. And also go to conferences, present your research. Don't be scared. I know some of those conferences can be very scary places, but don't worry. Remember, you are the expert. You've written this piece of work.
Absolutely. Any other questions? I think we taking more time from you, Doc. So sorry about that. Any other questions, guys? Okay, before we go, can you please just let us know how did you find the session today? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. No, it was really enjoyable to learn about everybody's areas, and really fascinating. And I wish everybody well, especially the people who any day now they're about to submit or they're waiting for the VIVA. And of course, there's a few people here just embarking on their journey. So I wish you well, and it's going to be really interesting. There's going to be highs and lows in that journey, but definitely it's going to be a worthwhile journey. So please stick with it. Stick with it.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Docs, for first of all, again, for agreeing to come, and thank you very much to join us in this. I'm talking here to the PhD students. There are some kind of more sessions, so I think I will do more sessions on how to write applications for kind of when you apply for academic jobs, which is really very important, and how to survive interviews, because I think this will be very, very useful for those who are in the later stages of their PhD. Another piece of good news I wanted to share with you, that I along with or with collaboration with the doctoral college, I created a kind of a SharePoint that I included all the PowerPoint for the personal development planning and all recording and everything. Still under construction. So I will share the link, and you will be amazed with the work that you involved in since we started. One thing I just wanted to mention, because we approaching the end of the academic year, but I'm happy to continue to provide you a kind of research, with a PDP during summer. Do you mind if I continue with this during summer, or do you want me to stop?
No, I'm happy to continue, Abir.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue.
Yeah, okay. So if anyone
Please, let's
approach-
continue. The PhD doesn't stop.
Okay, yes, absolutely, absolutely. If you are approaching your VIVA and you wanted to, and definitely there will be a session on more session on MOOC VIVAs, etc. But if you are approaching your VIVA and you really need any kind of, you know, more observation, more comments, etc. Contact me and we'll try to arrange a session even with all other PhD students or with yourself, and in addition to the one that you are going to do with your supervisory team. Good luck, all the best, and see you next week. Thanks very much, Ayodele, for covering me last week, by the way. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your
Okay, you're welcome.
contributions. For your contributions.
so
Thank you to everybody for sharing your experiences, your work with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Abia, are you still there?
Yeah. I'm still there. Just give me a second because, you know,
Yeah. Very welcome.
I will stop recording though.
Yeah.